I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Popok of Legal AF, and this is a breakdown of what happened in day one of E Jean Carroll's civil rape and defamation trial against Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a defendant in this case, but he has not been present thus far, although it's only been one day that's taken place. But it doesn't appear that Donald Trump is going to show up on any days based on the opening statement made by his lawyer on day one. Yes, we got through opening statements on day one. They picked a jury on day one. Talk about efficiency. I just want to tell you how the day started. The day started with Judge Kaplan addressing the jury pool and saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moynihan Courthouse. You may become jurors in E. Jean Carroll versus former President Donald Trump. The trial will take 5 to 10 days. You have each been assigned a number. You are not going to be referred to by your name. This case is going to be tried before a jury that is anonymous, God willing. No one will ever know your name. We'll start with 48 prospective jurors in the room and more downstairs who will get the questions in writing. I ask both parties to ensure their clients and witnesses do not say anything to incite violence, to undermine the rule of law." And like that, the trial began. Jury selection took place. Michael Popok, what happened on day one?
Wow. Day one was more than I actually thought was going to happen. I mean, in federal court, we're going to talk about on this hot take, the difference in federal court and state court is shocking. In state court, jury selection alone can take 2 or 3 days, especially in a very, very high profile case where you have an ex-president accused of rape on the other side. Not so in Judge Kaplan's courtroom. In federal court, he was handling the jury questioning primarily. There were some questions that I thought were ridiculous that were suggested by the Trump camp, that none of which were used by the judge in his questioning of the jury. A few of the ones, of course, suggested by the more reasonable side of the case, the plaintiff side, were used by the judge. And we have 9 jurors. All we know about them is that there's 6 men and 3 women. That's all we know. And we're not going to know really anything more. By this point, we would know in a non-anonymous jury, we would know things like occupation, names, where they reside, which part of the city they reside in, and all of that. What we do know is none of them claim to have look at regularly or at all, any social media by Donald Trump. No tweeting, social truthing, none by E. Jean Carroll either. None of them are election deniers because they were asked that point blank. None of them have gone to a Trump rally. This is what we call a standard New York jury. Right. We don't know exactly who's Republican and who's Democrat, but all of them, after being searingly questioned by the judge, and only by the judge, said that they could be fair and impartial in rendering their ruling. And it's a relatively short trial. It's not the several weeks that would happen in even the Fox Dominion case. It was a 6-week trial. This is a relatively short trial. If you got 5 or 6 witnesses on the plaintiff side, we'll talk about them during this hot take, and you've got really no witnesses on the Trump side, even Donald Trump. I mean, but I want to give one thing, and I want to turn it over to you with what you picked up from opening day, including the opening statements and who did the opening statements, which was already a fascinating first strategic decision, which I think blew up in the face of Donald Trump, but we'll leave that for a moment. Let's just talk about trial for a minute, because we talk about it a lot on Legal AF. You and I talk about it a lot in our hot takes. But for those that are tuning in, let's just go through it quickly. We have a lot of pre-trial. Everything you've heard up until this moment, ladies and gentlemen, our listeners and followers, is really about pre-trial practice before Ben started with how the day started. If you've heard about motions that were filed and basically motions that were denied against Donald Trump, about anonymous jurors and about certain types of evidence and about continuing the trial for 30 days or 6 months or having another deposition, all that happens before the trial. The jury is not aware of that. They may be aware of it from hearing about it before they were picked, but it's not part of the box of what they're in the courtroom at all. They get the pleading at a certain point, which is the complaint that was filed by E. Jean Carroll, which lays out her case, but that's not evidence. And the jury is told that. They get the answer, which is the denials by Donald Trump. But they don't know about all that inside baseball stuff that we've been talking about, which is really, really important to the shape and the contour of the case, but isn't in front of the jury. And then you have jury selection. You gave the verbatim what the judge told the prospective jurors. The prospective jurors are held in a jury assembly room. He brought them up 48 at a time. He loaded them into a jury box by number, by seat number. And then he starts questioning them, and he starts dismissing ones either for cause, meaning they've said something that means they can't be fair and impartial in the judge's view. There were very few, if any, for cause. And then the each side has the right to have, for no reason whatsoever, as long as it's not like racism, that's got to be a no-no. But if generally you're allowed to dismiss or strike any juror that you just don't like for whatever reason. And so when they start doing that, I don't know how many exactly there were. Maybe there were 5, maybe there were 6 on each side. Then you go strike one. Okay, let's move. And then everybody moves up in the box a bit, where they move up at least numerically. And then you're hopefully left with the total number that they agreed upon. In a federal jury, it's between 6 and 12, and the judge here is using 9. So there's 9 jurors, 6 men, 3 women. There's 3 alternates just in case something happens over the next 5 or 7 days where somebody gets dismissed, so they don't have to go. Normally, the alternates don't know they're alternates until the very, very end, so that they pay attention and that they take notes. And then at the very end, they're told, okay, sorry, thanks to your service, you're gone. And then we go right after that and some law instruction by the judge, where he told them, this is the Adult Survivors Act that this case is under. This was passed in November of 2022 or whatever it was. This is what battery means, sexual battery means in the state of New York, so that you can orient your mind to the evidence you're going to hear. And then he turns it over to both sides for relatively short opening statements. Presented by E. Jean Carroll goes first, and then Donald Trump's lawyer. E. Jean Carroll's lawyer was not Robbie Kaplan, although she's the lead lawyer for the case. It was her partner, Sean Crowley. She gave that opening. Side note, she was once a law clerk for Judge Kaplan. I'm sure that didn't hurt when she's moving around the courtroom. She feels very comfortable there. And Joe Tacopina, not Mr. Perry from Kansas City, but Joe Tacopina gave the opening. What did you take away from the openings?
Well, I was candidly surprised that Trump went all in on Tacopina. We've seen Tacopina make these media appearances where he certainly didn't endear himself to the American public. If the American public was the jury, he frankly looked like a complete and utter liar and a buffoon. And there was no tact at all. And it just was kind of clear that he was a liar. Sean Crowley, a very, well-respected lawyer, diligent, who just in a worksman-like fashion just went through what took place, went through the timeline, went through who the witnesses were going to be, went through, what this case is about. I thought it was succinct. It hit all of the points. An opening statement, remember, is not an argument. It's not called an opening argument. That's for the closing. That's the closing argument. The opening statement is when you tell the jury, this is what the evidence will show. And I think for purposes of this opening, I think Sean Crowley, on behalf of E. Jean Carroll, did that job the right way. Here are the witnesses that are going to be called. Here are the contemporaneous witnesses who were called by E. Jean Carroll. You're going to meet them. This isn't a he said, she said case because E. Jean Carroll told other people, Sean Crowley said, and you're going to hear from them directly. You're also going to hear from other victims who Donald Trump sexually assaulted. They are going to take the stand in this trial. You're going to hear Donald Trump's own testimony. And then they highlighted some of the key portions of Donald Trump's testimony that the jury should pay attention to. They said Donald Trump will argue, and Donald Trump's lawyers will argue, that he didn't sexually assault E Jean Carroll because he says that she is not his type. And then Sean Crowley said to the jury, you know what that means. That means that Donald Trump was saying and is saying that she's too ugly for him to sexually assault. However, then they point out the portions of the deposition, you will see where Donald Trump thought that E. Jean Carroll was his ex-wife, Marla Maples. Remember that key portion of the deposition? And then Sean Crowley said, look, you're going to see all of this evidence. You're going to see what Donald Trump says in his own words, and then we're going to give the case to you to make the decision. Joe Tacopina went up there and basically, like the bull in the china shop that we've talked about before, just basically attacked E. Jean Carroll, said she's doing this for fame, basically said that she's a complete and utter liar, said that everybody's a liar, that all of her friends who are going to be testifying are liars, and then he said at the end of his opening statement that it's going to be it's their burden, it's plaintiff's burden to put on this case, and all of the evidence is going to come from plaintiff, they said. And so we don't expect, is what Tacopina said, that we're even going to be putting on any witnesses at all. You're going to have to decide just based on what the plaintiff says. To which point Judge Lewis Kaplan had some questions for Tacopina at the end, based on Tacopina seeming to suggest that Donald Trump's not going to show up. Because Tacopina said in his opening, we are not going to show you, we're not going to put on any witnesses, which even if you're not going to do that, I don't know why you would put that in your opening or try to even, you don't have to say that in your opening.
Well, he said it a little, yeah, I agree with you. He said it a little bit weird. He said, we're going to try our case through their witnesses, and you're going to see testimony, sworn testimony, which is a signal that it's going to be deposition, not live. But I agree. Why would you not leave the door open that you have to trot Donald Trump out?
Here's a direct quote. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Carroll brought this case and the burden remains on her to prove it. That's our entire defense. That and some sworn testimony from Donald Trump that you're going to see, which was referring, though, to his deposition and not him being in person.
Yeah, I agree with you. So let me, I have a new riff off of something you said earlier. We try to find different ways to criticize Joe Tacopina. I have a new one now. It's tactless Pina. I mean, he was exactly what you said. He was completely tactless and clueless. And you told the audience tonight rightly that the thing that starts off the case is the opening statement. I found the report of Sean Crowley's to be just perfect, pitch perfect. You lay out, as you said, the witnesses. I want to talk about, Ben, with you, two witnesses I hadn't focused on before, which are former Bergdorf Goodman department store employees. We'll get there. We haven't heard much about them before today, yeah. But they were listed as well as supporting, corroborating witnesses for E. Jean Carroll. That was very statement-like. Joe Tacopina's was very argumentative. In fact, but Robbie Kaplan and Sean don't want to jump up and go objection, argumentative, although I have done it to throw the stride off of my opponent while they were giving an obviously overly argumentative way of presenting the opening. The way around that is the old cheat, which is you say, the evidence will show that she's a liar. The evidence will show that she's in this for the money and because of politics and whatever. He mentioned George Conway in his opening because there's always been, you see it in Fox News, there's always this linkage to where George Conway apparently talked to E. Jean Carroll. She'll have to address this in her direct examination, and was based on his quote unquote encouragement that she brought the case. Doesn't mean she conjured up and has falsified what happened to her. It just means that she, talked to somebody and he said, you should bring this case. So they brought that up. She's political. She's doing this for the money, trying to ridicule her in front of a jury. Maybe because he thought he had 6 men in the box and not more women in the jury pool. So he felt maybe a license to do that. Big mistake, as far as I'm concerned, having had juries that are comprised similarly like this and otherwise in cases that are that have this kind of bombshell evidence.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our next partner, ZBiotics. Now, if you're like me, you've probably skipped a workout because of drinks the night before. It happens. But if you're committed to your healthy routine, you need ZBiotics. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. Just remember to drink Z-Biotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Now, I can't lie, after we hit 1 million subscribers, I may have partied a little bit too much that night. But luckily, I knew I had Z-Biotics. Now, as instructed, I drank a bottle of Z-Biotics before any alcohol, and I was amazed at just how good I felt the next day. Give Z-Biotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/legalaf to get 15% off your first order when you use LegalAF at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So remember, head to zbiotics.com/legalaf and use the code LegalAF at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode.
So I would not have gone this way. He did. And I think it's a calculated error on his part, but we're going to have to see. Now, on E Jean Carroll's part, she's going to have to deal with something. You know, the lawyers have, you and I, when we try cases, and these lawyers have fighter pilot awareness, situational awareness, 270 degrees, if not more. I'm watching the judge, I'm watching the jury, I'm watching the opponent, I'm watching the witnesses. In watching the jury, some court watchers today said, for instance, that when Sean Crowley went through the chronology of what happened that fateful day at Bergdorf Goodman, the department store almost diagonally across from Trump Tower, when she ran into a guy that she knew from around town, Donald Trump, started with playful banter and ended with her being shoved into a dressing room and raped. There's no way around it. Sean Crowley said he put the ex-president put his penis inside of her client. So in presenting that to the jury court observers or court watchers saw that at least one of the female jurors, and they're all very attentive apparently, which is good. They're all engaged. They're all writing notes. Again, the alternates don't know they're alternates yet, so they're taking good notes. One woman of the three, we don't know what the alternate makeup is. I only know that the three of the women are actual jurors. Some woman in the box had a visceral reaction to when Crowley got to the chronology, the part of the chronology where she said that E. Jean Carroll, after this playful banter, which she admits to, it started at the revolving doors at the front of the store, made its way to Donald Trump suggesting that she try on some sexy lingerie for another woman that he was going to buy a present for. That was the banter. But then it all changed, which it often does in sexual attacks. He, according to E. Jean Carroll, he went into the dressing room with her, or she and he walked into the dressing room together. And that struck at least one of the jurors sort of weird that she would allow him into that region, right? The female dressing area. E. Jean Carroll's explanation for that, which Sean Crowley did a nice job in opening and explaining to the jury, was that is the reason, one of the reasons she didn't report this for 20 years, is she thought she brought it on herself because in this playfulness, not seeing Donald Trump as a threat, she let him into that area. It then changed in a hurry when he pushed her up against the wall and raped her. One of the women nodded when Crowley said, something like, you may be asking yourself, why did she allow that? So they're going to have to do, that helps the plaintiffs know what they got to do, what work they have cut out for them when they let E. Jean Carroll take the stand. They're going to have to cover that because the jury had a reaction to one aspect of that. And so you pick up that in the opening statements. Joe Tacopina, I haven't heard any positives in the reaction to the jury. Even though it's heavily men, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to side with Donald Trump and they're going to think that she's a phony, a fraud, a hoaxer, and some sort of crackpot, pointing to the interview on Anderson Cooper, for instance. And then he thought he was going to, this is too cute by half, because Sean Crowley ended with a photograph the now infamous photograph, which hopefully we have, the now infamous photograph of E Jean Carroll, her then husband, a very famous local newscaster who I actually liked and followed as a child and a young person, John Johnson on the ABC News, and meeting Trump, Ivanka, when he was married to her, and the four of them, which we all know now from deposition, and now the jury knows, Donald Trump mistook E. Jean Carroll for Marla Maples, his other wife. So he thought he had two wives in the picture. Only Donald Trump would think that. And Crowley did a great job by saying, I thought he said that she wasn't his type. She was exactly his type because he confused her in deposition with his wife, Marla Maples. So Joe Tacopino, they all knew that picture was coming. So they had a picture ready. And their picture they have is that E. Jean Carroll, when she wrote her memoir, she wrote an article and then a book that was basically horrendous men, despicable men in my life, some of which she named and some of which she did not. She named Donald Trump in the article. She said he was the last despicable man in my life because I never had sexual relationships with anybody else after I was raped in the dressing room by Donald Trump. And she gave a tour in New York, which I didn't really know about, but she gave a tour in New York, a Despicable Man tour. And she was out in front of, there's a picture of her out in front of Trump Tower, which is diagonal from the department store, with somebody wearing a Trump mask and maybe having a smile or a laugh on her face. And Tacopino used it to say, see, she's too jocular for somebody that claims to have been raped by that person. I think that backfires on Joe Tacopina. She's not she's not like at a Halloween parade and she's laughing next to the Donald Trump figure. She's giving a Despicable Man tour of which he is the centerpiece, standing in front of Trump Tower. I'm not sure, but they wanted that cute little, see, we have a photo too. But I think that backfires. What did you think about that use of the photos by both sides?
Yeah, I mean, I understand why E. Jean Carroll used it. I do not understand at all why Tacopina did it. I mean, that has nothing to do with what the underlying case is about. I mean, ultimately, there are certain points that Tacopina can hit and do it in a way that is kind of deeply respectful of women who are sexually assaulted, but try to say here, there's simply not enough evidence. I mean, which to me, if you're, again, I'm not trying to give Tacopina advice, so I won't give him more strategy. There's a way to tone it down if you have a job to do in that situation. Not a job I'd ever want to personally take, but he, to me, did a horrible job. He's not the right person to do that role. And after the jury left, Judge Kaplan then asked Tacopina whether or not he just confirmed, based on what he said in his opening remarks, whether or not Donald Trump was going to show up or not. It sounds like Judge Kaplan's like, it sounds like you're saying he's not going to show up. Tacopina, that true? And Tacopina goes, the answer is, I'm not sure, Your Honor. And then the judge is like, well, you're going to have to tell me, like, enough of this. Like, you're going to tell me this week. And
this week.
And the exact quote from the judge was, fish or cut bait, is what Judge Kaplan said. Fish or cut bait. So I don't think Tacopina endeared himself at all to the jury. But Popok, you mentioned those other two witnesses that were mentioned who we haven't really focused on, the two witnesses who worked at Bergdorf Goodman at that time. You're right. We haven't talked about that, but why do you think that's going to be important?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I did research before this hot take, because we followed the case on Legal AF right up until the moment. We heard about a lot of deposition transcripts. We knew about the sister-in-law that she spoke to contemporaneously at the time, the editor at Elle magazine where she worked, who she spoke to at the time. I knew about those. I didn't know about. I forgot about the two former Bergdorf Goodman. Well, they've made a big deal out of the following, the defense. They made a big deal out of, in a public department store teeming with people, how would he have possibly have pulled her into a dressing room and nobody would have noticed or nobody would have heard it? And Joe Tacopina said, there's no video surveillance evidence. Well, that's true. It's from 1995 and 1996. There's no medical evidence, right, because she didn't report it at the time. But he made a big deal out of that. I assume either these Bergdorf Goodman employees somehow, I'm starting to remember this as we're talking, Ben, about hearing about this. remember her being there, because Donald Trump being there, even though he wasn't president, he was a celebrity at the time. They either remember him being there, so they place him at the scene of the crime. They may not remember her. And or they're going to testify about at the time that she says it happens, which Sean Crowley says, the first time I'd heard it, that it was at night at a time when it was not crowded and there weren't a lot of people there. I heard her definitively say that in the opening, or at least that's the reporting. So maybe these people are saying, yes, at 7:00 right before closing on a Tuesday or whatever the day was, there would not have been a lot of people there. The lingerie section at Bergdorf Goodman is not where all the traffic is. I've been to that store a lot. If you're talking handbags, if you're talking jewelry, you're talking perfume, yeah, but lingerie is not very busy. So it's either lingerie salespeople who are going to talk about the pattern and practice in that department, and or it's people that remember Donald Trump in 95 or 96 frequenting the place and looking for lingerie for presents for other people, like girlfriends at the time. What do you think it's about?
Well, I don't know, so I'm not sure. But here's the thing.
Stop me.
But yeah, but here's the point I want to make. But normally we would know at this time, because there would be pretrial discovery on it. Those witnesses would have their depositions taken. There would likely be what are called motions in limine, pretrial motions about what they are going to say. One of the things about Donald Trump having these incompetent lawyers like Alina Habba, who is pretty much doing it on her own before Tacopina, but Tacopina is not much of a step up, is that I don't think they know what those people are going to say. And I think that Sean Crowley in her opening did not want to reveal too much in terms of what they were going to say to kind of give the roadmap. And so it was actually done strategically of, jury, we want you to be aware that these people exist. I'm sure there was a moment there too where these individuals' names were listed on a witness list. And I bet you that Tacopina and Habba didn't even really know who they were, and they were like, who are these people? Because they didn't do the basic discovery to even kind of find out who they are. But I think they're going to play a major role. As we wind down, Popok, though, this summary from day one of the E. Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump rape trial and defamation case, your final thoughts. I'll leave you with the last word.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see, you and I talked about on Legal AF who the first witnesses were going to be. At 10 a.m. tomorrow, they're running 10 to 4:30 every day, these trials. We're going to find out whether it's E. Jean Carroll, which I thought it was going to be, or it's going to be Natasha Stoyanov, formerly of People magazine, who claims that she was also sexually assaulted by Donald Trump while she was at Mar-a-Lago, or Jessica Leeds, the woman who was unfortunately upgraded to first class just in time for Donald Trump to also sexually abuse her. We're going to find out that tomorrow. It's one of those three, and you and I will report back on that. Finally, we're going to see if it's just going to be the Joe Tacopina show where he's going to put on all the witnesses. You and I talked about before the hot take. Is Alina Habba going to have a role at all in front of this jury? Let me tell you, having tried cases as you have, it looks terrible in front of the jury if you have a woman lawyer at your table and you're using her as an obvious prop because she doesn't have any substantive role. I assume at some point, just not to piss off the jury, they're going to have Alina Habba do something. It may be something even shocking or surprising to you and me, Ben, about which witness she actually puts on. They're not putting on Donald Trump, so we know she's not doing that one. But we will see. I've tried cases in cross-examination, which is what they're going to do, where I didn't put on any witnesses, and I've done okay with that. But it's so surgical. It's brain surgery. It has to be done deftly and nuanced. And those are the skills, the very skills that are missing from Donald Trump's defense table.
We will keep everybody posted. We will be doing these recaps for each and every day of this trial to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information. I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Popok on this Legal AF special report on the E. Jean Carroll trial. Until next time, shout out to the Meidas Mighty.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.